Hey folks, this is John Braddock with Mountain Wave Weather. Gorgeous day we have out here on this early November 2019, but today we're going to be talking a bit about October 2019 because it was a pretty notable month in the weather department, not only for the Palmer Divide, but for a lot of parts of Colorado. Everything from heavy snow to extremely cold temperatures, a lot of records set all over the place. Very, very interesting month, and we're taking a look at it today. In general, October weather tends to be very interesting for Colorado, and it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in the mountains, the Front Range, Palmer Divide, or points south, there's always something going on. Huge swings in temperature are pretty characteristic, everything from very warm storms with air from the south to very cold storms with air from the north. In fact, this year we had quite a few Arctic outbursts, which is kind of unusual for this early in the year. On average, it tends to be a decently wet month, not quite as much as August or July, the monsoon months, but we do get our fair share of moisture, and it can come in any form, whether rain or snow. Really just depends on that air that's coming in with those storms. Let's take a look at what went down for October 2019. Primarily, we'll focus along the Palmer Divide, but we'll hit some other spots as well. If you have any questions about other areas in Colorado, always be sure to reach out. I'm always happy to answer weather questions. So one thing to keep in mind today, as we talk about the weather in October 2019, is a lot of the National Weather Service records are kept in Denver and are measured at DIA. So that's one thing to keep in mind when we talk about some of these record highs and lows. They're not necessarily for the Castle Rock area because depending on your topography and where you are in elevation, there's little microclimates. You might have been warmer or slightly colder than this, but it's a good place to start. October 2019 for Denver was the fourth coldest October on record. Pretty notable. We don't see a lot of cold air Arctic outbursts this time of year, but we definitely got one this year. It was also the 12th snowiest October on record, and as you can recall, a lot of places saw some significant snowfall, so it's pretty good for us. Several temperature records were set. A lot of them were low or low maximum temperatures. October 10th and 11th, you saw 13th and 9, which were record low temperatures set for that date. And as we all remember, October 28th through the 31st was bitterly cold. 28th and 29th, you had record low maximums, which are basically the high temperature for the day as the lowest recorded for that date, at 21 and 18 degrees respectively. On the 30th and 31st, you had new record low temperatures set for 3 and 7 degrees, which is extremely cold for this time of year. If you're looking for something a little more specific to the Castle Rock area, I put this chart together of daily high and low temperatures from a pretty accurate weather station in town. As you can see, there's some above average and below average temperatures recorded. The top blue line sort of being your daily high temperatures, the bottom gray line being your daily low temperatures. You see some above, you see below, but you definitely see the trend is there were a lot more below average temperatures, and that kind of gives you an idea of where we're going with the rest of this and how the weather actually turned out for the month for a lot of the Palmer Divide. So here's the actual specifics for Castle Rock. And this is temperature data to start out with. We'll get into the snow in a second. But your normal average high is 64.6. Your normal average low is 34.6. And your average temperature for the month is 49.6. So that's a combination of your highs and your lows all average out together. What we saw for the highs was 57.39 on the average, 27.30 on the low average, and a recorded average temperature for the entire month of 42.35. That's a whopping 7.25 degrees below average. And usually when we see below average months, 2 to 3 to 4 degrees is notable. 7 or more is respectable. So in terms of snowfall this year, we saw a respectable 21.2 inches, which is notable because the typical snowfall for the Castle Rock area is 4 inches for the month of October. So again, 17.2 inches above average, which is pretty high. Some of the storms we had moving through the month was the first one October 12th at about 1.6 inches. That was our first recordable snowfall for the year. So right around average, slightly early, but the October 24th storm dumped 7.1 inches. October 28th gave us another 5 inches. October 29th, 2.5 inches, and October 30th, 5 inches. So as you can see, along with that cold Arctic outburst, we got a pretty decent bout of moisture with it as well. For the record, when you go back and you look at the statistics for the snowfall season, which is usually September 1st through about May 31st, we're 16.9 inches above average on the season. Keep in mind, we're only 2 months into it so far. So a lot of people have been asking, does a snowy October foretell a snowy season or an active winter in general? I found some interesting statistics, and this was published on weather5280.com, which is another group of meteorologists that do a lot of weather forecasting and things like that. But they basically said since 1882, 48 years have featured Octobers with more than 4.2 inches of snow in Denver. Again, the station of record has changed over the years, but that's the stat we go with. Of those years, 66% of them went on to produce seasons with above average snowfall. For seasons with 10 or more inches of snow, and Denver saw 15 this year, it jumps up to 73% of the time. The last October with 10 inches or more was 2009, and before that was 1997. If you recall, 1997 was a huge blizzard month for Denver. And because there's always interest in this, I've taken a couple of snow totals from other areas along the Palmer Divide. Highlands Ranch and Lone Tree saw around 19 inches. Franktown saw 17.7 inches. Castle Pines, 18.1 inches. Larkspur was 17.5 inches. Elbert, 18.5 inches. And Monument, 17.3 inches. So as you can see, there are slight variations depending on the area you're in, the location, the altitude, little hills, microclimates, and I talk about those a lot because they make a huge difference. But for the most part, and you can see the general trend was everyone did very well for snow in the month of October 2019. So going back a little bit earlier to the stats I talked about with the Weather 5280 group, it brings up a couple questions, and they're probably interesting ones to look at. The biggest one is, does a snowy October mean the entire season will see higher than average snow? Good question. Did those years only finish above average because October was snowier than average? Is there any correlation between those two? Are we in for a higher than average snowfall this year? It's something I plan to look at. I'm going to look at the data, crunch the numbers, and I'm probably going to have a future update on either my website or a video like this. But it's really interesting, especially because we're in a neutral pattern this year, and you would say, okay, neutral pattern generally means we wouldn't expect to see higher or lower than average snow. We'd be kind of right around average for the year. There's some other weather patterns at play that factor in, but the problem is when you don't have a huge pattern like an El Nino or a La Nina or anything else going on, they tend to sneak up on you a little bit quicker than they normally would, and they're harder to forecast further in advance. So wrapping it all up for Castle Rock in October 2019, the summary is the month was significantly colder than average, and this is after a record hot September. So we've seen a huge spike between the highs and the lows, hot and cold. Typical Colorado fall weather, right? Snowfall was significantly above average with no ENSO, so that's an El Nino or a La Nina present to steer your overall patterns. So when we have gotten these huge swings, they've been a little bit harder to predict in the longer term, but we are still starting to see them based on other things that are going on in the atmosphere. Several low temperature records were set, not only for Castle Rock, but for Denver, for Boulder, a lot of areas in the eastern plains of Colorado. And Denver saw significant amounts of snow across the board. So whether you're measuring at DIA, Stapleton, or downtown, if you look at reports from all of those areas, everyone did pretty well on snow this year. So that about wraps it up for October 2019 and our review. Pretty active month no matter where you were. The mountains were active, Denver was active, Palmer Divide was active. Everyone got quite a bit of snow. Definitely saw some very cold temperatures, chilly for the month overall. And as we moved into November, it's gotten a little bit drier, a little bit warmer, not very active at all, but a lot of the models are picking up on a more active second half of the month. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on. In the meantime, we will be doing more videos like this on our YouTube channel. We'll have some articles back up on our webpage, which will be relaunching soon. So if you have any ideas of questions or comments or anything you've wanted to know more about in terms of weather or anything that affects our weather here around Colorado, be sure to send those suggestions to us. If we get a lot of interest in them, we'll put them up, we'll make a video, we'll make an article out of them, and we can kind of start building this up a little bit. So something fun we're going to try out. Anyway, have a good rest of your November, and as always, follow along with us. If we got any storms or anything interesting coming in, we'll be sure to send those your way.